Welcome back. In this video, we're going to take a look at how Trump could have paid $750 of federal income taxes on $446 million of revenue. So I've been researching this based on the information that we have. And I think you're going to find it really interesting and a great learning experience. I've put together a balance sheet for President Trump based on the information we have and a tax calculation using my free business spreadsheet template to show you how someone who had $446 million in income could, with our tax system, pay $750 in taxes. So you're going to learn exactly how that could happen and how you could do it too. So I've divided this into two parts. In this part of the video, we're going to go over the information that I use to put together the tax calculation and the balance sheet projections. The reason we don't have this information is because just like with the tax returns, Trump hasn't provided his business financial statements, income statements, and balance sheets. Now, for many companies, this information is public because they file their financial statements after they've been audited by public accounting firms, which basically approve that they've followed a standardized set of accounting rules called generally accepted accounting principles. Then those financial statements are filed with the Security and Exchange Commission, the SEC. And then we can all access those financial statements online because those companies are listing their stock for sale on the open market, and we want those markets to be safe. We don't want people to be getting ripped off. So that's why the government provides regulation, and then we all have access to their financial statements. Now, Trump does not own businesses that are publicly traded. He did at one point have at least one that I could find, but it did not fare too well, as you can see represented on the graph on screen. The stock price issued at almost $14 a share. It rose up to 32 people paid per share, but at the end of the day, they only walked away with less than $2 per share, and so people lost their money. The Trump administration posted on their website a while back a letter from their accounting firm which told us two things about Trump's taxes. The letter said that Trump's taxes were under ordinary audit by the IRS because of their size. This is just something the IRS does for businesses with a lot of activity and income. And it said that the Trump Organization is an overarching term that Trump uses, but that there's over 500 businesses that he's referring to when he says the Trump Organization, and that the types of businesses that they are is sole proprietors and partnerships. And I thought that was interesting because it doesn't really jive with what is on the disclosure statement or with what was on the New York State Business Records website. So this allows you to look up a business. I looked up the Trump Organization and there was nothing for that exact term, so no trade name or anything like that, which makes sense because the letter said that Trump uses the Trump Organization to refer to all of these sole proprietor and partnership businesses. However, an organization did come up with just adding Inc. at the end, and so that's a corporate structure. The problem is the letter said partnerships and sole proprietors. I found another letter that included S corps as well, but it's still 500 sole proprietors and partnerships. This is a corporation, and there's a lot more corporate structures, which we'll come back to that in a moment. This letter is now gone, and now there's a 404 page, actually a really hilarious 404 page, which I was really confused when I first saw this. I was like, what is happening here? Regardless, I was able to find another letter from Trump's accountants to certify this piece of information about how many organizations he has and is a part of and what types of businesses they are, because of course we're going to be looking at this in his disclosure. And this is the information we need to recreate his tax return. You can see here in the second paragraph, as disclosed in these financial disclosure reports, you hold interest as the sole or principal owner in more than 500 separate entities. These entities are collectively referred to and do business as TTO, the Trump Organization. Because you operate these businesses almost exclusively through sole proprietorships, S corporations, and/or partnerships, your returns reflect that income essentially flowing through. Now, as I just showed you, the Trump Organization Inc. is actually a corporation, and we are going to run into quite a few more corporate structures as well. The fact that his accounting firm got this wrong and did not include in this statement that he has corporate businesses is just bizarre. And you could start to say, well, maybe they just mean the way the businesses are taxed, but sole proprietor is a legal term. And therefore, even if the corporations have elected S Corp or partnership status for taxes, sole proprietor is a legal term. And so if he has legal corporations, why didn't they say corporations? The other thing to notice is that they literally say doing business as the TTO, the Trump Organization, which means that there actually should be a trademark filed somewhere, presumably given that New York State is where, their predominant activity is. I would have expected to see that trademark in New York State. Now, maybe they haven't actually filed that, and the accounting firm assumes that they have. Would it be the first time something like that has happened? But you would expect someone with this type of income to have the T's and I's dotted. Now in this video, I'm going to show you and we're going to talk about these public financial disclosure forms. What are these forms, you may rightly be wondering? They're forms that politicians and high-level government employees are required to fill out because of the Financial Disclosure Act, which was enacted in the late 70s in response to the corruption of the Nixon administration. The forms require the officials to report all aspects of their financial information, including their assets, income, liabilities, and other relationships and transactions. And we'll be going through that in detail in a moment. I did think it was interesting that it's only a civil penalty not to exceed $5,000 for knowingly or falsifying these documents, considering the importance of these being truthful. And so what is the point of the documents? Well, they're used to identify potential or actual conflicts of interest. A conflict of interest is a reason why someone would be making a decision that's not in the best interest of the American people and the country, because they have this other situation based on their finances, typically are connected to their finances, that causes them to make a decision that's based on their own interests because they have this conflict. Basically, this is the most information, the most reliable information we have, because President Trump is filling these out and filing these with the United States Office of Government Ethics. So one would presume that these are reliable sources of information, and it's really all we have other than random estimates. So I'm going to jump in and show you how to find these documents. So I searched government of ethics.gov is how we know we're dealing with a government website. And I wanted to make sure that I was getting the forms from a government website. We're going to scroll down. Here we can see find an individual's ethics document. So then we'll come down here and we'll search the name being Donald Trump. And we're going to click next. So now we can see here are his filings. So his latest filing was in 2020, and this is annual for 2019. So let's take a look at this one. Okay, here we are. Here is Trump's Public Financial Disclosure Report, it's Form 278E. You can see that this is for the tax year 2019 and for the entire year. So this first section is interesting. Filers' position in held and outside organizations. I was really surprised to only see one here listed. This is for the Trump Foundation, Inc., which is a nonprofit. At least it's listed here as nonprofit. Part of the reason it dissolved at the end of 2019 was because it hadn't followed proper rules for filing as a nonprofit to maintain its nonprofit status, and it had been found to commit self-dealings. So it could then never properly file as a nonprofit because there had been all sorts of self-dealings. And this is something I factored in since this wasn't dissolved until the end of 2019. Trump could actually contribute a large portion of his income for a charitable deduction. And because of the tax changes in 2017 that the Republicans passed, that deduction would no longer be limited. And this was actually one of the key ways that we'll see in the tax calculation, one way for really creating a much lower tax result. You know, you get a deduction for donating to a charitable foundation because you're supposed to then use those funds charitably. If you spend them on personal expenses, then it's the same thing as just spending the money on personal expenses. Either way, it's illegal and fraud. You can see position held director from February 18th, 1987 until December 2019. So if we go back to the instructions, this section is to report any position that you hold outside of United States government. We can see here position held partner in a law firm, in an LLP. So I do feel like this section is missing a fair bit of detail. Like, this is where we should see the list of those 500 organizations that Trump has an interest in. As far as the position held, if it's a sole proprietor, it would say owner, sole proprietor. If it's a partnership or a multi-owner LLC, it would say member or partner. And if it's a corporation, it would say investor, shareholder, or if he owns an actual position in the company. And all of that information would be from the organization's operating agreement. And it just seems a bit odd that that's not listed here. This section is vague, and a lot of these businesses are going to be listed in part 2. But without knowing the position held, it's hard to have a full picture of the person's financial activity. Let's head to section 2. So section 2 is filers' employment assets and income. We'll find the instructions here, and this was a little weird. These two sections kind of overlap, your positions and your employment assets and income. For purposes of this part, employment related is interpreted broadly to cover all of your non-investment activities as well as your retirement plan accounts. So they say report your small business if its value was more than $1,000 at the end of the reporting year, or if you received more than $200 in income during the year. So value is going to be the balance sheet where we report how much money we have in our bank account, what's the value of the real estate we have or that we paid for it when we purchased it, the value of equipment, the value of any assets, things that are used in the business to make money. That's why we're choosing a range, because you're looking at the year, right? So the value is going to fluctuate during the year. Now you can see the next column is income type. So if it's business, rental income, or you're selling an asset and getting proceeds, and then the income amount. Now you can see this income amount is a set amount. It's not a range, it's just an amount. So this is some examples that they're giving us for small businesses. Heading back over to Trump's situation, this is a pretty interesting listing here. We can see Wall Street LLC, okay? underlying assets, commercial real estate, and we can see here value over 50 million. Over here under the income amount, we see over 5 million. And this was rental income. So that's 5 million in rental income for 40 Wall Street LLC. So 50 million is going to impact his balance sheet for the value of 40 Wall Street, and 5 million is going to be his income for taxes from 40 Wall Street. This is valued at over 50 million rent, over 5 million, but then we also have some in Chicago, Illinois. There's a schedule attached that shows condo sales as well for 82,137. Then we have a partnership here, and then we have the value 25 million to 50 million. We have the type of income rent and 1 to 5 million. So now that you kind of, understand how to read these lines, I want to show you one issue. We can see number 5 here has North Cannon LLC. Okay, LLC, it could be a single member LLC, or it could be a multi-member LLC. And we see here we have a partnership. This is supposed to be the president's personal assets and income. So it's the assets and income attributable to him. He would get a Schedule K-1 from each of these businesses to put on his personal return. So, of course, I presumed that this is the value being allocated to him and the income being allocated to him as rent. However, when we then take a look at these attached schedules, that didn't really seem to be the case. These are the schedules that they were referring to, and this is that 809 North Cannon LLC. And here we can see there's one owner that has 100% ownership, and it's North Cannon Member Corporation. So that's not Trump. Like, Trump is nowhere listed here as an owner. And in fact, he's nowhere listed in any of these businesses as an owner. There's just other businesses making up the 100% owner. Like, these aren't Trump, the individual. So for example, if we go to this business, 809 North Cannon Member Corporation, which is the first one on the next page here, well, what's being listed under this business? Because typically this business would include the other business. So we'll see how many people are interested in this video. That's a rabbit hole that I would have to really dissect to take a closer look to see if stuff is really being, double counted essentially. You can see that this is DJ Holdings Management Member LLC is the 100% owner of this. And then they list the ownership in. Now, the other one I had mentioned was the UN 845 UN Limited Partnership. So there are two owners, one owns 60% and one owns 40%, but they're just other LLCs that are also listed in this document. These are not Trump. I mean, nowhere here is Trump. Here, finally, we see one. Trump family members here. Well, but still, why Trump family members? We only care about Trump's percentage. These are supposed to be his financial public disclosure reports. So this is pretty confusing. Regardless, I'm going to move forward and use the totals that are reported on here for the balance sheet and tax calculation, which you can check out in the next video. But I just wanted to dive through these in the process because I think everyone should understand these so that we can keep tabs on our politicians and government workers so that we understand the finances and understand the financial aspects of all of the companies that control our lives and future. But let's take a look at the other sections in here before finishing up. Of course, we have the art of the deal, which is making income of between $100,000 and $1 million. Some other books, Time to Get Tough, which has made less than $1,000. Think Like a Billionaire hasn't made any money. The Art of the Comeback hasn't made any money. Why We Want You to Be Rich hasn't made any money. Part 3, Filer's Employment Agreements. Pension plans, which must have been through whatever TV deals he did in 1992 and 1989. Filer's sources of compensation exceeding $5,000 a year. It seems weird that this isn't filled out, but maybe because he wasn't an actual employee, he was a sole proprietor, partner, member in businesses. Part 5 is about the spouse's employment, assets, and income. So this is where we have Melania LLC and different businesses that were in Melania's name. Part 6 is other assets and income. And so this section actually lists bank accounts, and you can see the value and then the income range for interest income. Some of the interest income seemed awfully low for the balances given. There's also a few family trusts listed here. And you can see that there's a Y in the EIF column before the value there. And that's basically saying that these are out of his control, which probably is kind of normal for a trust anyways, but that's a column. That's how you indicate that as the president, you don't really have a control in this interest, and that's why it's not a conflict. But that's only really been checked. Yes, it was NA under all of the other sections. Part 7 is transactions that are reportable. So I skipped this for my analysis. And then we get to the liability section. This section is interesting. There's a fair amount of liabilities. I did read that some of these actually came due sooner than they are showing on here. You can see the last column shows their maturity date, which that means when the loan itself is due. These are obviously huge, huge loans. Part 9 is gifts and travel reimbursements. I thought it was interesting that nothing was listed here because I was under the impression that Trump had reimbursed his airline company. He has an airline company for his travel reimbursement through the government. So I would have expected to see that here. Then lastly, we have the appendices that we were already looking at here that list all of those companies that were listed for the assets and income section in part 2. And again, I would have expected to see Trump's name as the sole owner for all of these companies, or at least the portion being listed in these documents. So that remains very confusing to me. It's something I learned in this process of breaking this all down. And if I get a good response on these videos, I'll definitely dig deeper into that. So do let me know in the comments below what you think, and if you want a deeper analysis of that, if you'd watch it, share this video with other people who want to know about these things and know what's going on with our politicians, because that was one thing that struck me when I was researching the public financial disclosure forms, is that they're really meant for the public to enforce. The people who are supposed to enforce them in the government are the director of the Department of Ethics and the Attorney General. Well, both of those two positions are appointed by the president themselves. So that's like saying, the people who are going to enforce this are employees of the person who needs the enforcement. Now, granted, these are used for other positions in government as well, but when it comes to the president, which Nixon inspired these rules, it does seem a little bit silly that Congress or the legislative branch, like another branch, should have been given the power to oversee these. That's all for this video. I just wanted to show you where the information is coming from that I'm using for the tax calculation in the next video, where I show how on 446 million of income you could pay $750 in taxes. If you like this video, be sure to give it a like so that YouTube knows. If you have something to share, thoughts on this so far, do post your comments in the comment section below this video. I'd love to read them. Share this video with someone who you know who might enjoy it. And otherwise, don't forget to subscribe if you're new here, and you'll be notified when the next part of this video goes out that really goes through the tax calculation. And with that, that's all. I'll see you next time. Bye.